Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf Hayomi, Menachos Menachos, Daf Gimel. We are holding 8 lines from the top of the Amud, Kadosh Kadosh. So we're at the 2 dots. I'm right in the middle of a discussion actually. This relates back to Rabbi Shimon's Shita, which we learned yesterday, who says, look, a Kohen who was involved in processing a mincha, Shalai Lishma? Well, Shalai Lishma by mincha is irrelevant. Why? Because what he's saying is plainly false. This deviation, claiming to be doing a different mincha, is plainly contradicted by the very facts, by his very own activity. He's doing mincha of type A, deep fried, and he's claiming, well, I'm being kaimitz machvas, shallow fried, dry. It's nonsense, right? We ignore. We don't have to take into account. That's Shalei Lishma. And the way Rabbi explained it, because it's a svara. Reb Shimon follows svara throughout Shas. He says, he fashions the halachos, he analyzes and packages halachos and mitzvahs based on svara. And this too, logic lends to this conclusion that the Torah was not concerned about a deviation which is plainly contradicted by the facts on the ground. His actions speak greater than words, right? So that applies to a mincha, right? Which has different types, which are plainly clear, plainly evident. There's no point in falsifying. It's not reckoned with. But when it comes to animal karbanos, since the process that applies to all the different karbanos are very similar, if not identical, so in that case you have to reckon with his deviation. He's doing an oil claiming that it's a chatas, who's to know that he's falsifying? So that machshava, that intention, that declaration has to be reckoned with and affects the karban. Says the Gemara, okay, let's go through various scenarios and let's see if this principle holds true. Okay, so the first case is Kadosh Kadosh, which includes an oila, a chatas, which is meant to be shechted in the tzafin, that side of the azara. Kachim kalam, like a shlamim, can be shechted anywhere, but kachim kadashim needs to be in tzafin. So he gets up and does shchita on a kachim kadashim in tzafin, claiming that it's a shlamim. Why do we consider that shalai lishma? Ignore what he's saying. You're here in tzafin, apparently for a reason, because it's kachim kadashim. So what you're saying is false, plainly contradicted by the facts on the ground. Kachim kadashim shechtam b'tzafin, l'shem, for the sake of kachim kalam lirtzu. Let the carbon be a-okay. Why? Because the activities, the actions, the process itself is the greatest indicator on this carbon, the Kadosh that they're Kachim Kadashim and not Kachim Kalam, because otherwise you wouldn't be standing at the Kachim Kalam, you'd be doing it on the other side of the Yazara. So why is that a problem? Why is it Kosher Lishma? Point to Reb Shimon, just ignore it. Says the Gemara, it's not so clear. Eimer de Amar Achmana. True. That the Torah allows a shlamim to be done in darim, also in darim, but only in darim. B'darim v'lei b'tzafin bi'amar. Did the Torah then say you could only do it there or not here? Tzafin is not exclusively for kachim kadashim. You can do kachim kalam here as well. So, who's to contradict his claim that he's involved in kachim kalam? This now, in fact, you have a Mishnah that supports this. Shchitasim chal makim bazar. Kachim kalam can be shechted anywhere in the azara. So you're right. An oila needs to be specifically here, but a shlamim that he's claiming to be doing could be anywhere, even here. So again, his incorrectness isn't necessarily undone by the facts. So you have to reckon with it, and it adversely affects the car. Next case, kachim kalam. Right? So karbanis which are of the lower level, like a shlamim. Sheshachta medarim, whose shchita took place in darim, where you can't do kachim kadashim. But he's claiming, l'shem kadosh kadashim, I'm doing an oila. Lirtzu. Let the carbon be perfect. Ignore what he's saying, because here, clearly, it's not an oila. It wouldn't be allowed in this corner. Ma'aseid, mechichan alein, the actions, the process itself, is the greatest indicator that, in fact, it's a shlamim, the kachim kalam ninu, and not an oila, because otherwise you wouldn't be standing here. Because if in fact, if it's an oila like he's claiming, he was doing it on the other side of the Azora. So let's ignore what he's saying. It's false. Amri, the answer was given like this. Maybe he shouldn't be doing it here, but he's doing it anyways. Maybe he's transgressing. Maybe Kaddish Gadashim Ninu. People can say, yeah, maybe it's an oila as he's claiming it is. And he's violating. He's transgressing. V'shachat lubedarim, he's doing the shchita bedarim. So who's to know? And therefore, it's considered shlei lishma. Says the Gemara. Yachi. Oh, based on this, let's shift back to Menachos. You tell me a mincha is always safe, always immune to shlei lishma, which does not affect the mincha because it's plainly evident he's falsifying. Here's an example. Machmas, which is a mincha that was fried on a shallow pan, more of a stiffer material. He's doing the kmitza l'shem marcheshes, claiming that it's a marchesh, a deep fried nami. Well, here too you can apply the aforementioned argument and say, let's invalidate it. Why? Hayde kekamitz la marcheshes. Maybe the reason why he's saying that I'm doing kmitza for marcheshes, Omar, we can interpret it as follows. Maybe the owner had committed to a marcheshes type of mincha. And although he's bringing it in a machvas, which is not the way he promised, the marcheshes, it's really meant to be a marcheshes. And he was violating, he's transgressing. He wasn't keeping his word. He brought it as a machvas. Well, he shouldn't have. So now, technically, this is really labeled as a marcheshes. It should be a marcheshes. That's his promise. That's his net. That's his karba. So when the kohen does it for the sake of marcheshes, you can't say, well, you're contradicted by the facts. Quite the contrary. Maybe this is really a marcheshes. In its format, it's being brought as a machvas, but in its origin and in its labeling and in its destiny, it really should be a marcheshes, as he's claiming, as he's declaring. That's not a plainly contradicted declaration. It's the opposite. Maybe that's actually the way it was supposed to be and the way it's labeled. So let that be reckoned with. Says the Gemara, no. After all, what's the format at hand? What does it look like? It looks like a machvas. Well, if it looks like a machvas and it walks like a machvas, it is a machvas. So once again, his marcheshes claim is plainly contradicted. You know what? In that case, even if you're right, even if you want to speculate that the fellow had committed to a marcheshes, it's true. Marcheshes nadar. But once he brings it as a machvas, too bad, it is a machvas. And to claim otherwise is false. Ki maisi lo b'machvas, machvas habi. It is a machvas. Kesnan, as the Mishnah says, hoimer harei alai b'machvas. The fellow promises to bring a machvas, ve'vi marcheshes, and he actually brought a marcheshes, or the opposite, marcheshes ve'vi machvas. Too bad. What you brought is what you brought. Masha hevi. What he brought is done. But he hasn't fulfilled his commitment. But in terms of the actual designation of this specific mincha, it is what it is. So deviating and claiming otherwise is just fantasy. Well, not so quick, says the Gemara. Hold it. V'dilma perhaps, Omar zulavi b'machvas. Maybe it was more than just that he committed to bring a machvas. Maybe he actually pointed to the flour material and said, this will be processed into a machvas. In which case now the flour is labeled as machvas material. V'hevi marcheshes. But he actually brought it as a marcheshes. So now if the kohen claims that it's a machvas, maybe he's some truth to it. So it's not plainly false. So perhaps you have to reckon with that shlei lishma. Because it's not as we have in a Mishnah, zulavi b'machvas. If he committed to bring this material, he pointed to this, will be brought as a machvas, ve'evi marcheshes, and he actualized it as a marcheshes, or the opposite, marcheshes. He committed this material to a marcheshes, ve'evi machvas, he brought it as a machvas. Harizu psula becomes possible because it's misprocessed. Because the material is committed to the other type. So now we have a kasha. Because when the kohen switches designations, perhaps there's some truth to it. When he's pointed to the machvas and saying it's marcheshes, maybe What he means to say is this material was meant for macheshes, it's macheshes material. So there's truth to what he's saying. You can't just ignore it. And if it was an incorrect mislabeling, then it's shlei lishma. Says the Gemara, according to Rabbanon, that we reckon with how it was committed and how it was labeled. You're right. This issue would be true. The Reb Shimon, but according to Reb Shimon once again, which is the author of our conversation here, right? We're talking about Reb Shimon's opinion. Reb Shimon says that we don't care about how it was labeled. Reb Shimon says, even if this material was committed as a marcheshes and then was brought as a machvas, he's fully fulfilled. He has now fulfilled his promise. We don't care about, Almost apparently according to Reb Shimon, we don't reckon with labeling with respect to this type and that type. So even though it was committed to this type, it was brought the other type, it's okay. Whether the labeling related to the material or to the personal commitment. Bottom line is, it is what it is. The way it was brought, the way it was presented, that's what it is, and nothing else. So attempting to mislabel it is nonsense, is plainly false, and therefore not reckoned with. Okay, so that substantiates Reb Shimon's sheet. Now let's move back to animal karbanos. In some cases, we should not reckon with shlei lishma because it's contradicted by the plain facts on the ground, which according to Reb Shimon is the overriding factor. Elamiyat, if that's the case, oila sheshachal l'shem chatas. He has an oila on hand. He's shechting, claiming that it's a chatas. Tirtza, the carbon should be perfectly okay. We should discount his deviation. Why? Because an oila is not a chatas. The high zachar, an oila is a zachar. By nekeva, chatas is a nekeva. They're not interchangeable, and everybody clearly sees what it is. Well, it's not so clear. Even the ikka sayer nasa, there's one type of chatas that a nasi, a king would bring, which is a goat, a sayer, a male, the zachar, which is a male. So now we don't know. Maybe this oila that he's claiming to be a chatas is really a chatas of a nasi, which as well could be a zachar. What about Omer L'Shem Chatas Yochad? He's standing with an oil and he's saying, I'm shechting it for the sake of a personal chatas that a private person brings, which is always going to be an nekeva. Michael Amos, in this case, there's no way to reckon with his deviation. It's plainly false. V'su, furthermore, chatas yochad. If he takes a plain person's chatas, which is an nekeva, sheshach l'shem oil, and he has in mind an oil, which is always going to be a zachar, a different gender, tiratza, it should be perfect. Ignore it. Ignore shleshma, the chatas nekeva, v'oil zachar. They're different genders. Mechasi ba'al. Says the Gemara, the sheep has a tail, so the hind area is covered, and it's hard to tell whether in fact it's this gender or that. That's when he brings a sheep, it has a tail. When he brings a goat, which has no tail. It's clearly different than an oila. This is a female, that's a male. Ella ben schar, when the kevos, lav, ada, tayo, the issue. Apparently, people can't really clearly discern differences between genders when it comes to animals. So once again, any deviation, any shlei lishma cannot be plainly contradicted by the facts on the ground, which are not necessarily so evident. What about the following exchange? Pesach. It takes a korban Pesach, which is meant to be a very young sheep or goat. Ben Shana, which means within the first year of birth. Ben Shtayim means within the second year. Okay? So Pesach, that he took a Pesach, he did a shechita, shach l'shem asham, which is meant to be older. Literally, that should be a perfect korban. The high Ben Shana, because the Pesach is meant to be younger. Ben Shtayim, the asham is meant to be 2 years. Says the Gemara, well, kivan the ikka asham nazir, asham etzorah. Depends which asham. Asham that a nazir brings, that a etzorah brings, are meant to be young as a Pesach, lepsikale. So it's not clear what he had in mind. He's saying l'shem asham, it means the young asham. Who's to call him out on it? Who's to know? What if he specifies? Amar, he says, clearly, I'm doing the Pesach l'shum asham gzelet, which is meant to be 2 years old. L'shum asham il, which is meant to be 2 years old. Michael Emema. So if he clearly referred to asham gzelet and asham ilis, which are plainly older animals, then he's plainly falsifying. V'su, furthermore, asham gzelet, asham ilis. What about if he takes a real asham gzelet, a real asham ilis, which are meant to be older, and he claims I'm shechting it as a Pesach? Different age bracket. Sheshach l'shem Pesach. Lirtzor should be perfect. It should be acceptable. It should be valid. The Pesach is a young goat. The Pesach ben Shana. V'hani, and these are older. Ben Shtei Shanim. Ella, says the Gemara, oh, you know what? Age is hard to define when it comes to animals. Bain, the difference between a younger animal and a slightly older animal, very hard to discern. Ben Shana, Ben Shana, Lebain, Ben Shtei Shanim, Lav, Adatay the Inchi, people won't necessarily pick up on that, and therefore it gives to confusion. Because sometimes you can have a younger animal looking old, and vice versa. The Ika Ben Shana, you can have a young one, the Mechse which appears to Ben Shtaim like an older one, and vice versa. The Ika Ben Shtaim that looks like a younger one, the Mechse Ben Shana, so you don't know what's what. One more last question. Sa'ir sheshachtel shem asham. So he has a sa'ir, a goat, which is, let's say, a chatas, right? And he claims that's an asham. Lirtzi. The carbon should be valid. Let's discount what he's saying. The height semer v'haiseir. Because the asham, Rashi says, is meant to be a sheep with woolly hair. The v'haiseir, but the goat has goat's hair, different format. And Rashi says this is davar golol hakolhu. Everybody, even a unlearned person can tell them apart. Amri, once again, the answer is like this. Dichra uchmu. People will say, Amri, people will say, Dichra uchmu. Even though he's claiming that it's an asham, which is typically a sheep, maybe this is a dark sheep. And they won't necessarily call him out on it. What about egel upar? What about a calf or a cow? Sheshach l'shum Pesach. So he has a chatas, a cow or a calf, and he's claiming it's a Pesach. A Pesach will never come as a cow or a calf. Or the asham, or has in mind an asham, which again can't come from a cow or calf. Lirtzu. Should be kosher. And the egel upar, because these types of animals, the Pesach v'asham lecha, are not to be found by Pesach v'asham. Says the Gemara, you're right. In this case, you're right. Enochanam, you're right. In this case, we discount his deviation of my zvachim, and although we refer to zvachim as being susceptible to shalei lishma, right zvachim, for the most part, we have to reckon with the shalei lishma, but in this case, you're right, where the differences are clearly discernible, and his deviation is clearly overridden by the facts on the ground, you can just ignore it, and the carbon is perfectly kosher. Continues the Gemara. Okay, so back to that original contradiction, that apparent contradiction between two quotes of Reb Shimon. This was back on the Beis Amud Beis. In one instance, Reb Shimon states that Shalei Lishma by Mincha is not really relevant. We don't reckon with that incorrect thought, because unlike animal karbanis, where there is room for confusion and mislabeling, by mincha it's different, because each mincha is distinct, has its own special format, deep fried, shallow fried, dry, mixed with oil. So his claims to the contrary are contradicted by the facts on the ground. He's dealing with a deep fried, he's claiming that it's machvas, that it's a shallow fried, so we don't reckon with it. It's a non-factor. But in a different place, Rav Shimon says that even shalei lishma by a mincha would adversely affect the mincha. So far we had Rabbah, then comes Rava, and then comes Rav Ashi. All coming to reconcile this apparent contradiction. So Rabbah told us yesterday, look, the determining factor is whether his intentions, whether his claim is contradicted by the facts on the ground. So if he's obviously falsifying, we don't reckon with it. I'm doing a machvas and claiming that I'm doing the kmitza for the sake of marcheshes, it's a non-issue. Okay, so that we ignore, and the mincha is perfectly fine. But suppose he mislabels the owner. Now that's not so blatantly evident, right? Whose mincha this is. In that case, the shalei lishma factor has to be reckoned in, and it affects the mincha. And that's what Rav Shimon said. That's what he meant when he said that by mincha you have something unique, which is ma'aseh mechichen alea, the actions, the process itself exclaims louder than words. so we can override what he's saying. As opposed to karbanos, animal karbanos, where it's different, because the process is more or less the same regarding all karbanos, and there's room for mislabeling. So according to Rabba's approach, when his claim is obviously wrong, that's the more reason to ignore his claim and to consider the mincha to be perfectly fine. Here comes the Rava. Rava takes the opposite approach, just the opposite. If anything, if his intentions, if his declarations are contradicted by the facts in a blatant way, if anything, it's worse. Rashi says, because it could lend to people misinterpreting and thinking, well, you can actually do that. You're allowed to do that. Look, he's doing it. Why can't I? So according to Rava, it's just the opposite. When it's blatantly false, it's all the worse. Here's Rava's approach to reconciling the apparent contradiction between the two Reb Shimons. Like Kash, here's the answer. Kan b'kavitz mincha l'shum mincha. Kan b'kavitz mincha l'shum zevach. He says like this. If he's doing mincha A, claiming to be doing mincha B, that's okay, that passes, that's fine. But if he's doing a kmitza, he's scooping the mincha, and claiming that it's an animal carbon, that he's doing it for the sake of an oila process, then it's possible. And the point will be that even though by the mincha deviation, just as by the animal deviation, it's blatantly false. Everybody sees it's mincha A, not mincha B. It's this type, not that type. Everybody realizes it's a mincha, it's not an animal. So you would think certainly it's possible. We have a pasuk which says that all types of menachos, all formats, are in the same family. In which case, if he mislabels one mincha for the other, it's kosher. But by animal korbanos, you don't have that advantage. If he mislabels a mincha, claiming it's an animal, or he's doing the process for the sake of an animal process, then it's possible. That's Rabba's approach. Okay, so again, Rabba Amalei Kasha depends what happens. Kan becomes mincha l'sham mincha. When he's doing mincha A for the sake of mincha B, then it's okay. Kan becomes mincha l'sham zevach. But if he's doing mincha and having in mind an animal carbon in this process, then it's possible. Mincha l'sham mincha is okay. V'zois Torah mincha. Torah means an all-encompassing family. Torah achas l'chal menachos. It's one package for all the menachos. So within the family, it's not considered a true deviation and doesn't adversely affect the mincha. Mincha l'sham zevach, however, that doesn't have this leniency. V'zois Torah mincha. The pasuk bundles together all types of menachos. V'zevach l'ksiv, but it doesn't mention animal karbanos. That's different. That's a true deviation, and that would adversely affect the mincha. So that's Rabba's approach. A blatant mistake, a blatantly false claim, is certainly worse. But lucky Kain, because by menachos we don't reckon with the mislabeling. Now, how does this fit with the words of Reb Shimon, who seems to say otherwise? But the Tana was quoted as saying, "Mipnei shemaseh mechichna alea." That's what he said, because the ma'asim, the process itself, overrides his deviation, which sounds like when it's blatantly false, and actually is a corrector, it's a good thing. It corrects it. It rectifies it. If anything, it's better. Hachikam, just the opposite. What Reb Shimon meant to say is like this. Despite it being blatantly false, the pasuk, V'zoyos Torah HaMincha saves it. Because it's all in the family. Even though it's a machshava which is loy, minkarhi, it's not just in terms of literally, translating the words, the loy minkara. It's nikar that it's not like what he's doing, like what he's saying. Meaning it's blatantly false. Viti puzzle. So if anything, that's reason for it to be puzzle. Because, as we said before, because it could lend to people thinking that you can do this, that you're allowed to deviate. Rashi says, "Machshava deloy minkar k'may shehu oimer." It's a machshava which is not nikar as he's saying, meaning it's clearly not as he's claiming. Okay, just in terms of how to fit it into the words. Avgad machshava lo minkar hi b'tibasal. If anything, that's reason to make it puzzle. The answer is v'zois teres hamincha. And we learn Torah achas kol menachos. All menachos are considered in the same family, and switching from one to the other doesn't affect the mincha. Now, Rav Shimon continued and said, well, that you have by this disadvantage, that's a blatantly false, claim, but said by the pasuk, that you only have by menachos. But by zvachim, so when you interchange animal karbanis, you mislabel the oila for their shlamim, etc. If anything, it's worse. What do you mean? If anything, it's better, because over there the process is very similar, or even identical between the animal karbanis, same type of shchita, etc. Right? So what do you mean to say? Well, by karbanis, you don't have this advantage. It's more a disadvantage, and more the reason to become puzzle, because it's more blatant. Just the opposite. It's less blatant. It's less obvious that he's mislabeling. So if anything, it's more the reason to be kosher. Umay, so what do you mean to say, Aval bezvachim einu kain? You're right, that's exactly what he meant to say. That by karbonis, it's even better. Over there, even though it's really the same shchita for all karbonis. So the deviations by animal karbonis aren't so blatant and obvious. So you think it's okay. The answer is the pasuk bundles together all types of menachos. You don't have that advantage by animal karbanis. But it doesn't say animal karbanis. So any deviation, even not blatant, would make it problematic. Well, by chatas, we do have the lashon v'zeres teres hachatos, which perhaps bundles all types of chatases together, and a deviation within the chatas family perhaps should not be detrimental. If that's the case, chatos chelev. So he has a chatas which a fellow brought to atone for eating chelev. Sheshach l'shem chatas dam. The kohen did the shchita, having in mind a chatas brought to atone for eating blood. Or l'shem chatas for the sake of a chatas coming to atone for avodas kechavim. L'shem for the sake of a chatas that a nazir brings. L'shem chatas that a metzora brings. Take shera should be okay because it's all in the family. It's all in the chatas family. Take share of a teratza, should be kosher and perfectly fine and count for the owner. Because the pasuk says v'zeres teres hachatos, and let's learn from there Torah achas chatois. It's all in the family. You're right. According to Rav Shimon, who follows this train of thought, you're right. But according to Rabbanon, it's not exactly so. It is, but it isn't. Partially and partially not. Rav explained to us. It depends. What chatas did he switch it for? Chatas chelev sheshach l'shem chatas dam. If he took a chatas that came for chelev and did the shchita for the sake of a chatas of dam, or l'shum for the sake of chatas of eskechavim, it's okay, it's kshera, because they're all coming to atone for sins. They're close enough. However, l'shem chatas nazir, l'shem chatas metzora, he had in mind the chatas that a nazir brings or metzora brings. That's not really to atone for a sin; it's to accomplish his purification process. Then a psula. Dahani oilos ba'adai ninu. Rashi has a gersa oilos ninu. In any case, they're more like an oila, more like a gift than an atonement. So it's a different type of strain, different type of brand. According to him, no, all types of deviations by a chatas are puzzle. Why? It's in the family. There's a special pasuk. It has to be case specific. V'shachat oisa l'chatas means l'shem oisa chatas for the sake of this particular purpose, this particular chatas. Okay, so let's stop for a second and recap Rava's approach to Rav Shimon. He says, look, in contrast to Rabba, who says a claim which is blatantly false is not reckoned with, just the opposite. The more blatantly false, the more obviously lying or falsifying is even worse. But the saving grace is we have a pasuk that by mincha, all types of mincha are treated as one with respect to shalei lishma, and that's kosher. We don't have that by animal karbanos. Regarding chatas, we have a discussion. Rav Ashi Amar. Here comes the third approach in explaining Rav Shimon. Loikash, here's their answer. When do we reckon with his shalei lishma thoughts? When do we not reckon? Depends. Kam b'kaimitz machvas shemacheshes. He has a minchas machvas, which is the shallow fried. And he says, I'm doing this machvas, I'm doing it for the sake of marchesh, deep fried. That's nonsense. right? Because machvas and macheshes aren't really labels, they're just describing the process. Well, if he's doing this process and presenting this format and he's claiming that's something else, it's a non-starter. He's stating, is declaring, is proclaiming something which relates to the format. The mana means the kli, the way it's processed. And thinking about the kli or the process doesn't affect the mincha. It doesn't touch the essence of the mincha. However, if he's thinking that it's a minchas machvas, and I'm doing it l'shum for the sake of minchas marcheshes, here it's problematic, because be mincha the pasal machshava kamachasha, because his thought relates to the mincha. This mincha, and that makes it possible. Once again, we have that same question regarding the wording of Reb Shimon, which seems to indicate a different track altogether. Now, you're saying minchas machvas for the sake of minchas macheshes. Even Reb Shimon says it's possible, but Reb Shimon seems to say otherwise. Seems to say that any declaration which is contradicted by the facts on the ground, which is obviously false, that actually helps us and helps us ignore, discount what he's saying. That's what Reb Shimon was explaining, and you're going the other direction. He meant to say like this: even though it's a machshava which is visibly false. So when it's machvas and he's claiming it's marchesha, it's visibly false. So if anything, you think it's worse, as we said before, when you do something blatantly false, it makes you worse. No, it's okay. Why? Because he didn't touch the essence of the mincha. He spoke about machvas marcheshes rather than minchas machas or minchas marcheshes. So according to Ravash's approach, it's simply a technicality. If he's discussing processes, that doesn't affect the mincha. But if he's discussing labels, minchas machvas, minchas marcheshes, that makes it possible. So again, he meant to say like this: Avagad machshava the minkari, or the lay minkari with the apostle. Even though what he's saying is contradicted by the facts, if anything, it makes it worse. It's okay because he's just discussing the format, not the mincha. Umay aval bezvachim ene came. When Rav Shimon continued, he said, "Well, by karbanis you don't have this. What do you mean to say? Avagad l'shchitas l'kulam." Because by karbanis, even though in a way it's better, because it's pretty much the same process applied to all karbanis. The same shchita applies to whether it's an oil or shlamim. Same thing with zrika, same thing with kabbalah, right? Zrika l'kulam, kabbalah l'kulam. So when he mislabels, he's doing an oil claiming it's a shlamim, it isn't blatantly false. So you think it's better? The answer is no. The answer is the reason why Shlei Shema affects the carbon is because he's relating to the shchita of the carbon, which is the part of the akrava of this particular carbon. He's mislabeling the carbon. He's claiming that it's a shlamim instead of an oila. That's touching the core of the carbon. That's considered mislabeling and shlei lishma. I have a question on you. What about chareva mishum blula? Chareva means a mincha without oil. That's a minchas chayte, and blula means mixed with oil. So why would Rav Shimon say it's okay if I mislabeled one for the other? Chareva, I have a chareva in front of me. I'm doing the kmitza mishum blula for the sake of a blula. Am I on Rav Shimon? Why does Rav Shimon say it's okay? You would think that the term chareva describes the type of mincha. The term blula likewise describes the type of mincha. We're not talking about the kli. The kli you ignore. That doesn't touch the essence of the mincha. But chareva and blula you would think is a label. So that's a mislabeled mincha. Should be possible. Blula is not the type of mincha. It's just describing the mixing. So if he's thinking about the mixing part, that's not touching the mincha. It's not mislabeling the mincha. Yachi, if that's the case, then l'shem shlamim nami. Kohen is involved in an oila, and he's claiming it's a shlamim. Who says that's mislabeling the korban? Lushum shlamim ba'alma. Shlamim means shalom, to make peace between myself and Hashem, between the owner and Hashem. Right? Reconcile. So, again, it's describing a process, not a type, not a label. No, you can't compare. A shlamim is a shlamim. Hasam zevach gufa ikri shlamim. The pasuk calls the korban a korban shlamim. The chsiv hamakar v'zdam hashlamim. Hazor v'zdam hashlamim. So the word shlamim indicates the type of korban. Hacha mincha gufa mi'ikri belula. By Menachos. The word belula is not a label. We don't find a mincha called belula. Belula is the act, is the mixing. V'chol mincha belula b'shem the mincha which is mixed with oil. Belula b'Hashem and Ikri, that's what it's called. Belula stamala Ikri, the word belula on its own is not a standalone label. Okay, so we pretty much concluded the three approaches to Reb Shimon. So we have Rabbah to start, Rava, and then Rav Ashi. Let's just briefly recap. So in some cases we reckon with a thought of Shlei Lishma by Mincha, in some cases we ignore it. When is this, when is that? According to Rabbah, when what he's claiming is blatantly contradicted by the facts, we ignore it. So actually it's an advantage to be contradicted by the fact. We just ignore it. Otherwise we have to reckon with it. According to Rabbah, just the opposite. When it's blatantly false, it's worse, but the saving grace is the pasuk says, V'zer ser mincha. Mix and match within Menachos is no harm. According to Rav Ashi, well, it depends if he's relating to a process. That's not mislabeling, as opposed to the actual type. The name, the label, that's called mislabeling. Now the Gemara will figure out why each one preferred his approach in contrast to his colleague's approach. Kuluk Rabba le'amri. The other ones did not agree with Rabbah, that when it's blatantly false, it's better. The other Rabbah, they held just the opposite. Machshava de mirkar pas rachmana. If the machshava is blatantly false, if anything, it's worse. Okay. Kurava le'amri. They didn't agree with Rabbah's approach. V'zer seres le'mashmalu. They didn't have the drasha of Zeis Teras, which allows for mixing and matching within the Mincha family. And finally, Rav Ashi le'amri, they didn't agree with Rav Ashi, because of the most recent kasha that we had with the blula and the chareva, and to them that was a strong question. Okay. Now, bottom line is, what's better? An incorrect thought which is blatantly false, or one which is not blatantly false? Rabbah says blatantly false is better. We just ignore it. According to Rabbah, just the opposite. Now, Musa the Pshita the Rabbah, this concept which to Rabbah was clear that what's blatantly false, it's better. Lahai Gisa in this direction. On the other end of the Rava, it was clear Lahai Gisa in the other direction. That the more blatant, the worse. Rav Ashi had this very question. The boy Rav Ashi. He presented the following question. Rav Ashi asked me Rav Asi. Rabbi asked, suppose he has a mincha and he's doing the avodah for the sake of an animal korban. Mali Amar Shimon, what would Rav Shimon's opinion be in this case? Here it's blatantly false. Is that good? Is it bad? Time of the Rav Shimon, Mishum de Machshava de Minkur le Pasla, is the reason why Rav Shimon allows a Shlei Lishma to be okay by a mincha. Because it's a blatantly false claim. Mishum de Machshava de Minkur le Pasla, Machshava which is Nika, which is clearly incorrect, that does no harm. And the same would be switching between mincha and animal korban. Again, it's an obvious falsification. Vaha, in this case as well, machshava de minkaru, and it's okay. Or, so that would be sort of Rabbah's approach. The more obvious, the better. Or on the other hand, you can go with Rabbah's approach. The more obvious, the worse. Time of the Reb Shimon, the reason why Reb Shimon sanctions a mincha shlei lishma, it's only because of the pasuk. Really, the more blatant, the worse it is. But the pasuk protects it. So interchanging between menachos is still kosher, but not between mincha and animal korban. So he responded we're not really sure what Reb Shimon's approach was. Klum higanu l'seif daita shel Reb Shimon. You think we were able to really delve into and analyze and conclude on Reb Shimon's true intentions? He wasn't really sure how to answer it, because each one of these three approaches that we discussed has a challenge. He didn't take Rabba's approach. Rabba's approach was that if it's more blatant, it's discounted. But we had a kasha. Oh yeah, we had a kasha yesterday from Abaye. So because of that kasha, he didn't adopt that approach. Rabba's approach of today, he didn't really want to adopt that because Mincha puts it all in one family. But what about chatas? Where it also says chatas. What about Rav Ashi's final approach? Again, there was a problem there. Mishum Kushya, there was a question that was posed by the Rav Achbei the Rava. So bottom line is, he didn't have a clear conclusion in terms of what Rav Shimon really had in mind, and therefore he left the question unresolved. All the best to you, and Atzlacha Rav.